I'm Joe from Carême cooking classes, and today we're going to do a bread video. We're going to make wholemeal bread because it's one of my recipes which people often ask me for. Of course you can use white flour and make white bread. It's quite simple, same principles. We're going to follow my recipe, which is actually in my book. You can order a Kindle version from Amazon because of course we can't get real books at the moment. But I've got the book, so we'll use it. It's on page 34, and I've written it up bigger because I haven't got my glasses on. There you go. We need, we'll just start off and make up things as we go along, eh? We need 250 ml of warm water. I came prepared. We need 1 tablespoon of sugar. Any sort of sugar. You can use honey. The yeast wants something to eat. So we need some sort of simple carbohydrate. We're using sugar. It doesn't even need a tablespoon, but less is good. I'll make it out. There's not much sugar there. Yeast needs something to eat, something, a nice warm place, something to drink, the water, and a bit of time to get going, to wake up. We're using fresh yeast because I have it. I brought it home from work. But dried yeast of course would work just as well, but I like fresh yeast, so I use it. And the recipe says about 3 tablespoons, which is, you know, I use a lump like that. The recipe is for 2 loaves, so if you're going to make bread, make 2 loaves. Crumble it up, put it in the water. You can do it in the bowl, of course, but you're going to see the yeast rising if you do it in the water. In the jug. We put it in the jug. You're allowed to stir it up a bit now, and then leave it for a few minutes for the yeast to do its thing. The yeast will grow and divide. It gives off alcohol, which of course the wineries use in town, and it gives off carbon dioxide, which is what we want. The carbon dioxide bubbles are what makes the bread rise. There you go. It's quite simple. It's going to take a few minutes for the yeast to come to the top, so I'm going to switch off, come back in a minute. Okay, we're back. The yeast has risen. It's quite frothy actually. There was a few minutes while I changed the camera angle. So we're just going to mix it up so that we get the sugar from the bottom. If there's any extra sugar, put it into the bowl here. Now the recipe says 1 more litre of cold water. So we'll get cold water. I've only got a 500 ml measuring jug here, so I have to do 2 trips. There we go. And we want a tablespoon, two and a bit tablespoons of salt. So, whoops, I've got my spoon wet, so I have to find another one. Goes off camera. There we go. Now, in the best Joe fashion, we're guessing the amount of tablespoons from a dessert spoon. Joe always does this. And then we want 1 cup of kibbled wheat. I buy kibbled wheat from More Wilson's, but you're going to have to make do for now. You're probably going to have to do without it for now. That's fine. It'll be fine. Now, forgot to get a cup measure. We'll have to improvise. Hold on. This is known as pixie cup, and it'll be a cup. There we go. Kibbled wheat is cut up wheat. You can use, if you don't have kibbled wheat, people say, well, can you substitute for kibbled wheat? And I say kibbled rye, which is not very useful, sorry. But it gives colour and texture to the bread. You can see that my one's got quite a bit of colour. There's another sort of kibbled wheat which is paler. Also tastes good, but obviously doesn't give quite as much colour. Now the recipe calls for flour, we're actually going to weigh it today, which I don't normally do, but I'll go on just for purposes of conscientiousness. These scales, of which I am not fond. Now, we say, what do we say? We say about 700 of plain and 800 of wholemeal. So I'm going to put in 650 of plain. Yeah. And then you can always put in more. It's easy, much easier to put in more flour than more water. And so I want, if the recipe says 800 of wholemeal, I want to put in about 750. Normally when I'm doing it at work, I go by the number of scoops, because this is bread that I make pretty much every day. And because we're all doing this stuff at home, we're going to mix it by hand. So there may be a pause while I do more mixing and you get bored. Hands. You can start off with a wooden spoon, but it's much more fun to do it by hand. It's disgusting. Sloppy, sloppy. We're definitely mixing it in a bowl. If you, when it becomes a dough, and if you can turn it on the bench to knead, because you get more force. But when you do that, you always add more flour, and then the bread turns out too dry. That's a mistake. So I'm going around and putting it into the middle, and we're getting dough. And you can see we've got dough, a wet dough, quite wet. This is good. Actually, not bad for guessing the amount of, well, not guessing, but working out the amount of flour and water. We could add a bit more flour, easily. That's quite wet. So there's sort of two stages to this. There's a mixing stage, which is what we've just done, and then there's a kneading stage. I haven't actually mixed bread by hand for ages, because I normally use a machine. Machines are more thorough. And now I've done the thing. I've got dough on both my hands, and I can't get more flour out. Nice work. And Stephen's off in the studio painting, so we're going to have to make a mess, which is kind of the point, We've got these days when we're not really doing much. Arbitrarily, I've chosen to put more wholemeal in, and I'll mix it in. It's much better to work out if you want to add more flour or water early in the piece rather than later, because the bread forms its structure early on. So you want to be doing kneading rather than later. You want to get all the mixing and get the consistency right early, and then just do kneading later. Ugh. As I say, it's half the fun. Yeah, look at that. A machine will do a much better job, but you don't all have machines at home. And you need a really quite powerful machine for this. So if you are using a machine, use it on its lowest speed, and please check the instructions which came with the machine, find them in the drawer, and check what its maximum capacity is, because you do not want to exceed it. They mean it about that. You know how you mean some things, you don't mean others? That one they mean. This is coming together well, actually. have to decide whether to just keep going or to pause it, but I think it only needs a minute or so more. I think I'll mark on the video where you have to skip to if you want to come to the end of the meeting. If I was doing it on the bench, I would use a slightly different action. You normally do the one where you go, you pull it towards you and you push it away. But because I want to keep the bread quite wet, I've kept it in the bowl, and of course it's really hard to do in the bowl. You see, you sort of fold it towards you and push it away, but it's hard to do in the bowl. If you had a less tall bowl, what do I mean, a shorter bowl? Yeah, a shorter bowl, Joe. If you had a shorter bowl, you could do that, but we don't. So we're doing this one. But I can feel it's stretchier, and so I know I'm getting there. Normally kneading by hand takes about 3 times as long as kneading by machine. And I can feel it. I'm starting to breathe harder. Oh, right. That's really getting there. If I looked at that in the machine, I would say that was looking mighty fine. So I am going to try and clean this up a tiny bit, because I'm going to rise this in the fridge, and I'm going to rise it overnight. This is what I normally do with the wholemeal bread. I originally started doing that because it's easier. It gives you a lot of flexibility. You make the dough now, you put it in the fridge, and then when you're ready to cook the bread, take it out, let it rise for a bit, cook it. Oh dear. It meant that when I was doing the cafe, I could have the bread ready for lunchtime without having to get up at 4 in the morning, because I'm not a morning person. There we go. That looks nice. It's kind of springy, and you can feel it has some structure in it. And look at the hands. Yes. Okay, I'm going to. There's a number of ways you can put it in the fridge. You can put it in a really good way is to put it in an oiled bag, like a plastic bag or whatever we use these days, because that doesn't use up so much room in the fridge. But you do want to be careful, because of course the yeast will expand and it'll push the fridge door open. It's done that on me before. So I'm actually just going to leave it in this one. Thinks about the amount of fridge space. I think I've got enough fridge space. I've got a spare shelf. So I'm just going to cover it with Glade wrap and leave it in the fridge overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to clean up a bit with Glade wrap on there. See if I can push the video button off. Welcome back. It's the next day, and the dough's been rising in the fridge, so we'll press on. Here it is. It looks a bit flat. Normally it sort of domes, but it hit the shelf on top, I think, the next shelf in the fridge. So, but it's certainly risen, so we'll look good. The only thing, of course, about rising in the fridge is that it's like handling cold putty. It's horrible. But we will persevere. Well, the first thing we'll do before we get dough all over our hands is grease the tins. We're using these tins, 2 tins, fairly large. I melted some butter. Grease these tins with butter, not too complicated. Of course you can use the spray stuff, but it's just as easy to use butter. There we go. 2 tins greased with butter. Very complicated. And then we want to find some flour to put on our bench. There we go. Dough, flour. Here, now we've got, a really useful piece of equipment, dough scraper. You can't buy one at the moment, of course. We're all trapped in prison. But when you get out, go to Wilson's and buy one. Give yourself a treat. Good use of $5. Because it cleans out the bowl beautifully. Dough is looking just right. Okay. Yeah, it's cold, sort of like clay. And you want to squash it a bit to get rid of excess carbon dioxide. It's quite springy, which means that we did knead it enough yesterday. That's good. A bit of squashing, pushing around a bit. So this is the action which you'd use if you were kneading on the bench. Pushing away from you, pulling it towards you. Yeah. And you notice it seems a lot drier than it does yesterday. Flour hydrates as it sits around, absorbs water. So using our trusty dough scraper, we cut them in half because we're making 2 loaves. And we're going to squash out both loaves. Here we go. You can just put a lump of dough into your tin and it will make perfectly good bread, but you get a better shaped loaf if you roll it out into a sort of rectangle, a rough sort of rectangle, and press it out into a rectangle and roll it up in a spiral. That's what real bread people do. When you get bread from, commercial bread, if you look at the end of it, you can often see the spiral at the end of it. So we're looking for that sort of shape. I'll do both of them in the interests of completeness. And then we're going to put sesame seeds on them, but here's sesame seeds. But it's quite hard to get them to stick. So we have a cunning trick. Here we go. If you put them on now, you can press them into it. Put them on the bottom. You can press them into it so that when you roll it up, they're on the top. It's pretty cunning. Sesame seeds on both. And then roll them up from the bottom. So you end up with the seam on, this is going to be the bottom, and the sesame seeds are going to be on the top. Good as a bookworm. There we go. See? And then this is going to go into our loaf tin. You're allowed to shape them a little bit in there. That's good. And the other one. You've got to handle them, squish them a bit so they stick together nicely. Make sure all the sesame seeds go on. There we go. Now these are cold, so they're going to take a while to rise. Ideally, you want them somewhere fairly warm, like 29 degrees is supposed to be optimum, and fairly humid is the best. But if you just leave them in a normal place, they'll just rise slower. It's not a big deal. I mean, they rose. I forgot to mention how long we left them in the fridge. Depends on when it suits you. I left them for like 24 hours because that's what suited me to do. But you can leave them for 2 days. They'll still rise perfectly well after 2 days. But after 3 days, trust me, they don't rise as well. There you go. We're going to leave these to rise. We're going to heat up the oven. I'm going to heat up the oven rather. And then I'll come back and we'll put them in the oven. It's not that complicated, really. Hey, look, the bread rose. It's amazing. The power of yeast. All right, that actually took longer than I thought. That was about 1 hour 45. The kitchen obviously isn't as warm as the kitchen at work, which is where I normally rise bread. But it's risen. I just waited. If in doubt, just wait. Go by the look of it, not by the timing. The oven's hot. So I'll stick it in. It's really, that's all there is to it. we go. I've never cooked bread in this oven before, it's a new experience. So I've got the oven quite hot, it's just on 200, just over 200. And in the oven at work it normally takes 1 hour 10 to 1 hour 20. That oven also doesn't measure the temperature, very well at all. This one should measure better, but I haven't had as much experience with using this one. So I'm going to check it just after an hour, and we'll see how it's going. But I'll show you when I get it out. Okay. All right, we're back again. I had a little peek in the oven. It's just on an hour, and in the best tradition of Joe's bread, I think we've overcooked one of them, but the other one looks really good. So I'll get them out and have a look. Oh yeah. This is the good one. Not quite sure that's ready. No, I don't know if you can hear that. It sounds just a little bit solid. So I'm going to put it in, I'll put it in upside down because the top is getting a little bit dark already. And the other one is dark on top. Let's not pretend. We'll get him out. Yeah, he's not quite cooked though. Not quite cooked through. I think the oven was a little bit hot. That's more cooked though. So the oven's cooking more on one side than the other, but it's still not quite cooked. So back in the oven. Couple of minutes, we'll be set. So the more cooked one I've taken out, it's definitely cooked. Sounds quite hollow. And I'm going to take the other one out now and take a look at that. Oh yeah. That should be cooked. Yes, yeah, you should be able to hear that. That sounds hollow. If it sounds dull, it's not cooked. If it sounds hollow, it's cooked. That's cooked. It's jolly good bread, eh? Not bad. So there we go. It's done. That's the wholemeal bread. You leave it to cool for at least half an hour before you try and slice it. I know nice warm bread is lovely to eat, but it doesn't cut at all. You get this gummy stuff on your knife, which is dreadful. And even after half an hour, it's really hard to slice. So leave it to cool, absolute minimum half an hour, and really an hour. You will not regret it. It's just murder otherwise. So, and the other one, yes, all right, I will show you. It is overcooked on the top, but we'll slice off the top, and that one we're going to slice and put it into the freezer for toast. Slice it before you put it into the freezer, because then you can just take out a slice and put it in the toaster from frozen. Marvellous stuff. But this one we like to eat fresh because it's lovely. I'll slice it in a minute. Well, in an hour. Alright, we're ready to slice the bread. It's an hour later. I went for a walk outside. It was lovely, but it's dark now. Now, use a good knife. Yeah, usual story. I cheated, I brought the good knife when I came home from work. And don't squeeze with your left hand too much, and saw like it's a log of wood. Good crust. Oh yeah. But honestly, it's just beautiful. And it cut nicely because we waited. There you go. It really is just nice. It's just like the one I make at work. There you go. We did it from beginning to end. Now, I don't plan to make videos every week or every newsletter, but I do think I'll make another one next time, because I think that we could do hot cross buns for Easter. I think it'd be quite fun. And they're easy. They're faster than the wholemeal bread, and they're really fun. And the good thing about hot cross buns is that even if they're not perfect, they're still really good to eat. Whereas if you make bread and it doesn't rise that well, oh dear, it's a bit of a struggle. All right, see you soon.